The morning sun spilled golden light over the billionaire's mansion, reflecting off the polished gates, as Maria, the young maid, adjusted her uniform and clutched the car keys tightly. She had only been working for the Johnsons for a few months, yet she already knew how demanding the job could be. Her duty today was simple: drive the two Johnson children, Ethan and Chloe, to their private school downtown. But her hands trembled slightly as she opened the sleek black SUV. There was always this unease she felt around the family, as if something wasn't quite right. Still, she smiled at the kids as they hopped into the back seat, unaware that this morning would change everything. As the car glided out of the mansion gates, the atmosphere was calm. Ethan was scrolling through his tablet, and little Chloe was humming softly to herself. Maria kept her eyes on the road, her heart heavy with thoughts she couldn't explain. She had overheard something strange the previous night, a late-night argument between Mr. and Mrs. Johnson about keeping the secret hidden, but she told herself it was none of her business. As she turned onto the highway, a sudden screech pierced the air. A truck swerved out of nowhere, its tires screaming as it tried to brake. Maria's heart jumped into her throat as she spun the wheel to avoid it. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this story, make sure to like, subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. London, California, Jamaica, Trinidad, New York, Florida, Atlanta, Nigeria, or South Africa. We'd love to know. And remember, we give shoutouts to the first 3 comments, so don't miss your chance. The SUV spun off the road, crashing into a ditch. Metal groaned and glass shattered as the world went black for a moment. When Maria opened her eyes, her head throbbed and the children were crying. But that wasn't the most terrifying thing. What she saw through the cracked windshield made her blood run cold. Standing in front of the car was someone she recognized, someone who shouldn't have been there at all.
Maria's breath hitched as she stared through the broken windshield. The figure standing in front of the car was a man, tall, dressed in black, with a familiar face that froze her soul. It was Mr. Johnson. But how? He was supposed to be at a business conference in Dubai. His expression was unreadable, cold, almost lifeless. Maria blinked hard, thinking her mind was playing tricks after the crash. But when she looked again, the man was gone. Only the sound of Chloe's sobs and Ethan's shaky breathing filled the air. Her hands trembled as she unbuckled herself and crawled out through the shattered driver's door. The SUV's hood smoked slightly, and the tires hissed. "It's okay, kids," she whispered, pulling them out carefully. Her voice was calm, but inside she was shaking. She looked around the deserted road, heart pounding faster than ever. Then she saw something on the ground, a wallet. She picked it up with trembling fingers. It belonged to Mr. Johnson. Same photo, same initials. She flipped it open and froze when she saw a folded document tucked inside. A hospital birth certificate with the name Chloe Johnson, but the parents' names didn't match. It said Mother Maria Thompson. Her legs almost gave out. The children were watching her, confused. Ethan asked softly, "Miss Maria, are you okay?" But she couldn't answer. The truth was clawing its way into her mind, something that had been hidden from her, maybe for years. Maria's pulse raced as she heard distant sirens. She knew once the police arrived, everything would come out. But what scared her most wasn't the crash or the secret she just found. It was the realization that someone had planned this accident, someone who wanted her to remember the truth she had been forced to forget.
The police sirens grew louder, echoing through the still morning air as Maria held the children close. Her thoughts were scattered, her heart pounding like a drum. She slipped the birth certificate back into the wallet and tucked it into her uniform pocket, just as an officer rushed toward them. "Is anyone hurt?" he shouted. Maria nodded weakly. "We're fine," she replied, though her voice shook. Ethan and Chloe were frightened, but safe. Only minor scratches. Relief flooded her chest. but it was short-lived. As the officers examined the wreckage, one of them picked up a piece of metal lodged under the SUV. "Looks like the brake line was cut," he murmured to another. Maria's heart sank. Cut? That meant it wasn't an accident. Someone wanted this to happen. She looked toward the direction she had seen Mr. Johnson's figure earlier, but there was nothing, only dust swirling in the air. One of the officers approached her with a firm tone. "Ma'am, we'll need to take your statement. Can you tell us what happened?" She hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. Her gaze fell on the children again, innocent eyes staring up at her, trusting her. She couldn't tell them yet. She couldn't even understand it herself. Instead, she said quietly, "The truck came out of nowhere." But deep down, she knew there was more, much more. A black car soon pulled up, and Mrs. Johnson rushed out, her face pale with shock. She hugged the children tightly, pretending to cry, but her eyes met Maria's for a brief moment, and in that single glance, she saw it. Fear. Not the fear of losing her kids, but the fear of being exposed. Mrs. Johnson whispered, "We'll talk later," before turning away. Maria's world tilted again. Why did Mrs. Johnson look so terrified, and why did she say later, like a warning? Something dark was unfolding, and Maria was now right in the middle of it.
That night, Maria couldn't sleep. The mansion was silent, yet she felt watched. She replayed the accident in her mind. The figure on the road, the wallet, the cut brake line. None of it made sense. But the most haunting thought was the birth certificate with her name listed as Chloe's mother. She sat on her bed, clutching the paper she had secretly kept hidden beneath her pillow. Her hands shook as she stared at the faded ink. Mother, Maria Thompson. That was her full name before she came to the city, before she changed her identity to escape her past. Her heart pounded louder when she heard footsteps outside her door. She quickly hid the paper under her blanket as Mrs. Johnson entered. The woman's face was calm, but her eyes were sharp, watchful. "Maria," she said softly, "you've been through a lot today. I want to thank you for saving the children." Maria nodded quietly, unable to speak. Mrs. Johnson smiled faintly and added, "But please, don't talk to anyone about the accident. The police are already handling it. Just focus on your work." Her tone carried a strange authority, like a warning disguised as kindness. When Mrs. Johnson left, Maria locked the door behind her, trembling. She whispered to herself, "Why is she hiding this? Why am I on Chloe's birth certificate?" She remembered vague images from years ago, crying in a hospital bed, hearing a baby's cry, and then nothing. Maybe she had been drugged, or maybe her memory was erased. Tears filled her eyes as realization struck. Chloe might actually be her daughter. Maria pressed her palms to her face, overwhelmed by fear and confusion. If that were true, then who was Mr. Johnson? And why did they take her child away from her? Outside, a shadow moved past her window, slowly, deliberately. Whoever it was, they knew the secret too.
Maria's breath caught as the shadow lingered outside her window. She reached for her phone, but before she could dial, the light in the hallway flickered off. Darkness swallowed the room. Her heart thudded wildly as she whispered, "Who's there?" No one answered. A few seconds later, she heard footsteps, soft, cautious, retreating down the corridor. She waited until the sound faded before opening her door. The hallway was empty, but a folded note lay on the floor. With trembling fingers, she picked it up. It read, "Stop digging, or you'll regret it." Her legs weakened, and she almost dropped the paper. Fear raced through her veins. Someone in the mansion knew she had found the birth certificate, and they wanted her silent. She rushed back into her room, locked the door, and sat on the bed, shaking. "I need to protect Chloe," she whispered. But how could she protect a child who didn't even know she was her mother? The next morning, Maria forced herself to act normal. She helped the children dress for school, her smile tight and shaky. Chloe ran up to her, hugging her waist. "Miss Maria, I had a dream that you were my real mommy," the little girl said innocently. Maria froze, her throat tightening. "That's a sweet dream," she murmured, brushing Chloe's hair back gently. But tears pricked her eyes as she wondered, was it really just a dream? Later that day, while cleaning the study, she found an old file labeled Project Haven. Inside were documents showing large payments made to a private clinic on the same date Chloe was born. There were signatures, too, Mrs. Johnson's and Mr. Johnson's. But at the bottom, one more name appeared, Dr. Bamidele, the same doctor who had treated Maria years ago when she lost her baby. The room started to spin. The truth was closing in on her, and whoever was behind it was watching every move she made.
Maria's hands trembled as she stared at the document. Every word, every number felt like a blade cutting deeper into her soul. Project Haven. The name itself sounded cold and calculated, not medical. She flipped through more pages and found something worse. Photos of newborn babies, numbers written on their tiny hospital tags, and lists of adoptive families. It wasn't just about Chloe. There were many children. It was a secret network, a business. Her breath hitched as the realization hit her. The Johnsons had bought her child. A loud knock on the door startled her. She quickly stuffed the files back into the drawer and pretended to dust the shelves. "Come in," she said, forcing her voice to stay calm. The door creaked open, and Mr. Johnson walked in, his expression unreadable. He had returned from his trip. "I hear you've been curious lately. Curiosity is dangerous in this house, Maria." His tone was low, smooth, but threatening. She tried to look composed, but her knees were weak. "I just wanted to understand what happened. The accident, the brakes." He stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. "Forget it ever happened. You work here, you get paid well, and you stay quiet. Do you understand?" Maria nodded, even though her heart screamed. When he left, she collapsed to her knees, tears streaming down her face. She realized she couldn't fight them alone. She needed proof, something that would expose what they'd done to her and those other children. That night, she crept back into the study, took photos of the documents with her phone, and hid the originals. As she turned to leave, a voice spoke from behind her in the dark. "You shouldn't have done that, Maria." She froze. It wasn't Mr. Johnson. It was someone else entirely. Someone she hadn't seen in years.
Maria turned slowly, her heart slamming against her ribs. Standing in the shadows was a man with a faint scar across his cheek, someone she never thought she'd see again. "Dr. Bamidele?" she whispered, her voice trembling. He stepped forward, his eyes dark with regret. "You were never supposed to know," he said quietly. "They promised me it would help you. They told me your baby had died during childbirth, but they lied. They paid me to change the records." Maria's knees went weak. "You sold my child?" she said, her voice cracking. The doctor lowered his gaze. "I was desperate, Maria. They threatened my family. And when they saw how attached Mrs. Johnson had become to the baby she couldn't have, I did what they asked." His words hit like a hammer to her chest. All these years, the Johnsons had built their wealth on secrets and silence, and her daughter was one of their stolen blessings. Maria backed away, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You're going to tell the truth," she said, clutching her phone tightly, "or I'll make sure the world finds out." Dr. Bamidele sighed, shaking his head. "You don't understand. They'll kill us both before that happens."
Before she could answer, the study door burst open. Mr. Johnson stood there, his face hard as stone. Behind him, 2 bodyguards entered. "I told you not to dig," he said coldly. He snatched her phone and threw it to the ground, smashing it. "Now you've left me no choice." Maria felt the walls closing in, but she wasn't the same powerless maid anymore. She had seen the truth, and she wasn't going to die with it buried. "If anything happens to me," she said boldly, "the police will find the documents I sent." Mr. Johnson's expression faltered for the first time. He didn't know she had already sent the files to someone that morning.
Mr. Johnson's face hardened as he realized she wasn't bluffing. "What did you do, Maria?" he asked in a low, dangerous voice. Maria stood her ground, though her knees trembled. "The world will know the truth," she said, her voice breaking. "You stole children. You stole my child." Mrs. Johnson suddenly appeared in the doorway, tears in her eyes. "Enough, please," she cried. "You don't understand. I couldn't have children. When I saw Chloe in that hospital, I begged him to save her. I didn't know she was yours until later. By then, it was too late." Maria shook her head, pain filling her chest. "You both had a choice, and you chose to lie." The room was silent, except for the sound of Chloe's footsteps. The little girl stood behind her mother, confused. "What's happening?" she asked softly. Maria knelt, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Chloe," she whispered, "one day you'll understand everything I did was to keep you safe." Outside, the sound of sirens drew closer. Mr. Johnson turned toward the window and saw flashing lights approaching the mansion gates. "You called the police?" he asked bitterly. Maria didn't answer. She didn't have to. Within minutes, officers stormed in, placing Mr. Johnson and Dr. Bamidele under arrest. Mrs. Johnson wept as she held Chloe close, while Maria stood silently, watching the truth unravel at last. Weeks later, the story spread across the country. Billionaire family exposed for child trafficking ring. Maria gained custody of Chloe after DNA tests confirmed the truth. They moved away from the mansion and started a new life in a quiet town, far from the haunting memories. Before we end the story, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. London, California, Jamaica, Trinidad, New York, Florida, Atlanta, Nigeria, or South Africa. We'd love to know. And remember, we give shout-outs to the first 3 comments, so don't miss your chance to be featured in our next story. Moral lesson: truth cannot be buried forever. No matter how powerful the lie or how long it's been hidden, one day light will find it. Always stand for what is right, even when it's dangerous, because justice begins with courage.